Wednesday, December 22nd, 2021, morning session of the Portland City Council. Keelan, please call the roll.
Good morning, Mayor. Good morning, Commissioners. Maps.
Here.
Rubio. Ryan.
Here.
Hardesty.
Here.
Wheeler.
Here. Under Portland City Code and State Law, the City Council is holding this meeting electronically. All members of the council are attending remotely by video and teleconference, and the city's made several avenues available to the public to listen to the audio broadcast of this meeting. The meeting is available to the public on the city's YouTube channel, eGovPDX, www.portlandoregon.gov, and Channel 30. The public may also provide written testimony to council by emailing our council clerk at cctestimony@portlandoregon.gov. The council is taking these steps as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and the need to limit in-person contact and to promote physical distancing. The pandemic remains an emergency that threatens the public health, safety, and welfare, which requires us to meet remotely by electronic communications. Thanks, everybody, for your patience, your flexibility, and your understanding as we manage through this challenging situation to conduct the city's business. We'll hear from legal counsel on the rules of order and decorum. Good morning.
Good morning. To participate in council meetings, you may sign up in advance with the council clerk's office for communications to briefly speak about any subject. You may also sign up for public testimony on resolutions, reports, or the first readings of ordinances. The published council agenda at www.portland.gov/council/agenda contains information about how and when you may sign up for testimony while the City Council is holding electronic meetings. Your testimony should address the matter being considered at the time. When testifying, please state your name for the record. Your address is not necessary. Please disclose if you are a lobbyist, and if you are representing an organization, please identify it. The presiding officer determines the length of testimony. Individuals generally have 3 minutes to testify unless otherwise stated. When your time is up, the presiding officer will ask you to conclude. Disruptive conduct, such as shouting, refusing to conclude your testimony when your time is up, or interrupting others' testimony or council deliberations will not be allowed. If there are disruptions, a warning will be given that further disruption may result in the person being placed on hold or ejected from the remainder of the electronic meeting. Please be aware that all council meetings are recorded.
Thanks, Naomi. Thanks, Naomi. Appreciate it. First up is communications. Keelan, our first individual, please, 913.
Request of Danny Rukin to address council regarding a for sale ban.
Good morning.
All right. Can you see me and hear me?
Yep, sound good and you look good. Good morning.
Great. Thanks a lot. Thanks, Mayor Wheeler. First of all, thank you for having me here. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your time. And I'm a proud and happy Portland resident. My name is Danny Rukin, and I'm also here on behalf of Compassionate PDX. We're a grassroots group of volunteers dedicated to creating political change in favor of non-human animals. And for the past 3+ years, we've been working at a city level to pass a for sale ban. What I want to talk about is that we've been so diligent in reaching out to city commissioners, some who are no longer here and some of you who are still here and some who are new, but we have been diligent about reaching out to you by phone, email. We've seen many of you in person before the pandemic. And what we're wanting is for Portland, as a compassionate, progressive, and ethically based city, to pass a fur sale ban on the sale of new fur. And the reason why that's so important is that because this is an issue of justice, it's an issue of equality and compassion. And we've had a lot of, sure, that sounds like a great idea, but now's not the time. When we first reached out to Nick Fish's office, the late Nick Fish, his office was very supportive and it seemed very promising. Asena Lawrence was extremely receptive, and she reached out to other policy directors and offices and was able to get us some time with people. The problem is that everybody we've met with says, yeah, sure, sounds like a great idea. Now's not a good time. This happened for over a year, almost a year and a half before the pandemic and all the civil unrest, recent civil unrest resulting from a lot of things has happened. So my point is that even before the pandemic, we were getting, in fact, Commissioner Fritz had said back in January 2019, in reference to our reaching out her in December 2018. So now we're talking, that was 3 years ago. She said, our staff is at maximum capacity for the number of intensity of issues. We're unable to add animal-friendly legislation banning fur sales at this time. Now, recently, Commissioner Rubio's office just said in December 2021, so now this is 3 years later, she's open to the idea, but that currently our staff's bandwidth is consumed by policies that have been taken a high degree of priority. So obviously that we know there are so many high intensity issues, houselessness, livability, mental health, drug addiction. We know the issues, civil unrest, injustice, police issues. These are not going to go away. Like we would said to you, to your offices over 3 years ago, these issues are complicated and they're not going to go away anytime soon. So why can't it be in the meantime that we actually do something that would be a win, which is just pass a fur sale ban? I also want to read something because we reached out at the request of Mayor Wheeler's office and a lot of you. We reached out to every possible stakeholder that might have a stake in this issue. We've been so good. We've presented you with model legislation. And as many of you probably know, this issue it's a humanitarian issue. It's not about the animals. It's about us as humanitarians. Do we have the willingness, even if it's not a good time? And historically, when is it ever a good time to do the right thing, to take a stand? And it can be while we're also working on these complicated issues. But you may or may not know that in British Columbia recently, they abolished all mink farms, all farming. And although that's not the issue we're presenting right now, it is connected because the fur that's sold here in Portland and most places in the United States is from either China, where there are no.
Danny, I'm sorry, and you've made your point really well. You're a minute over, and so I'll have
okay.
to.
All right, but I want to let you know that the Grand Chief in British Columbia said that international luxury markets should not be allowed to be selling fur based on the horrific, greedy fur industry and how they process the animals. I'm also in support of the foie gras ban, and I hope you do all unanimously support that as well. Thank you.
Dan. Appreciate you being here today. Thank you. Keelan, the next individual, please, item 914. Keelan.
Yep, sorry, I was muted. Request of Derek Primus to address council regarding health and safety.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear.
How you guys doing? Thank you for your time. I know you guys are really, really busy with everything going on right now. Like she said, my name is Derek. I want to thank you guys for your time. I own a business in downtown Portland and Pearl. I'm talking with you guys today to talk about the health and safety of my employees and my customers on a daily basis. I'm going to give you some examples of what I've had to deal with down there and give you guys, the council, the opportunity to persuade me that something will be done to ensure the safety of my employees and my customers in the future, or I will not be renewing my lease. I've been down there for 14 years. I started in 2007 when the little mini recession hit. I've been through the ringer. I've got blood, sweat, and tears into my business, but I will have no choice but to leave if nothing gets done down there. And I know you guys are doing the best you can, but I'm just going to give you guys some more examples of what I've had to deal with on a daily basis. I try to call non-emergency as much as I can to free up the 911 calls, because I know there's a lot of emergencies going on down there, but it takes me 50 minutes to get through, which is ultra frustrating because I'm trying to run a business. I can't be sitting on the phone all day. The homeless sleeping under the overhangs on my front door. I spend more time trying to get them away from my business, and it takes so much time away from my business, I can't run my business. So it gets a little frustrating. Like I said, they're blocking the sidewalks, garage doors. They're carrying weapons such as knives, screwdrivers, machetes. I'm truly scared for my employees' safety and no longer let my children come down to my store, which is heartbreaking to me. And because I can't ensure their safety. And as a dad, it's pretty tough. So They've been chasing workers around with needles around my buildings, and I can't get cops to come and take care of them. So those are a few examples of what I've had to deal with down there on a daily basis, which is it's ultra frustrating, and I don't know how much more I can take, to be quite honest with you. So I got a few questions for you guys, and this will determine if I'm going to renew my lease in April. My first question is, I know the ultimate goal is to house the 14,000 plus homeless on the Portland streets. How many homeless housing developments are being created? That's my first one. And where are the homeless housing developments going to be available? When are the homeless housing developments going to be available? And if you guys can answer some of these questions for me, it would give me a little clarity on whether I will renew my lease down there as a business owner. So I don't know if you guys can answer some of those questions, but I would love if you could.
Yeah, Derek, hang on, because there's a couple of folks who want to respond here. First, Commissioner Mapps, then Commissioner Hardesty.
Derek, I'm not in a position to answer your questions about houselessness in particular, but I want you to know that I have heard you. I believe that everyone on council has heard you. I know it's an act of faith, but I'm also here to ask you to please consider re-signing your lease. I recognize the challenges that Portland small businesses face, especially our businesses downtown. I want you to know that one of my priorities for the year 2022 is to take the steps that this council can take in order to make downtown cleaner and safer. I think we've made important steps towards that by stabilizing the police department and by renewing the contract with Downtown Clean and Safe. One of the things that I will be engaged with over the course of the next several months is a conversation with my colleagues in the city of Portland about other steps that the city can take right away to help businesses like yours stay open and stay safe. Thank you, and thank you for sticking with Portland.
Yeah, thank you for your guys' time. I know you guys' time is valuable, so I appreciate all you guys.
Yeah, we're not done yet, Derek. Commissioner Hardesty, then Commissioner Ryan.
Awesome.
Derek, first, thank you so much for showing up today and sharing your lived experience. As you see in front of your business and every place you go, there are a lot of people in our community that are struggling. This has been a really hard 2 years, and most people have been economically impacted radically. I'm going to be honest with you and say there's no quick fix for our houseless problem. But what I hope and what I've seen is a willingness for people to work collaboratively to help us in the most humane ways possible. There's many issues on our streets all over the city of Portland, as there are people who are suffering on our street. There's no one size fits all solution, and I'm not going to offer you one. But here's what I will offer you. I know that you and other business owners and community members want us to collectively fix this problem. And we can, because this is Portland, and when Portlanders put their back to it, we can get a lot done.
I agree.
And what I appreciate about you, Derek, is you did not come pointing fingers, because there's a lot of finger pointing. The reality is all of us collectively have a role in solving this problem.
I agree.
And I'm going to reach out to you after the first of the year, and I'm going to connect you with other businesses that feel like you, who are really putting their elbows into trying to help all of us recover economically. And yeah, we have a lot of needs in Portland, but we also have a lot of compassionate people who care. And Absolutely. So again, I just want to say thank you, Derek. You came with the right spirit, and I really, really appreciate you being here today. I know you wanted us to say, we're going to do A, B, C, D, E. And I am.
No, it's fine. I get it. We're all in this together, and I just appreciate you guys' time. I'm not here to point fingers. I'm here to work together, and that's what we can do. And I feel like that's what Portland's always been about. And that's the reason I fell in love with Portland was the compassion. I'm from Eastern Oregon, So originally, it's still my favorite city. I think we can fix all the problems, but we have to do it together. And
We have to do it together. And thank
I
you,
agree.
Derek. And
Yep,
my
you got it.
commitment to you today publicly is I'm willing to work with you to make Portland a city that actually most of us will economically recover from these series of crises that all of us have faced over the last 20 months. And
Awesome.
thank you. Thank you for hanging in there with us, right? We don't have it right yet, but if collectively we can get there.
I know we'll get there, but I have to voice my opinion, and I appreciate your time.
I appreciate you, Derek. Have a great holiday season, and we'll talk after the first of the year.
You
Thank
got
you,
it.
Commissioner Hardesty. Commissioner Ryan.
Yes, thank you, Derek, for being here this morning. Your message was really clear and crisp, and I love that you actually gave us when your lease is due in April. Of all your testimony, hearing that you can't bring your children to where you work is sad, and it says a lot. So also thank you for sharing that personal side. We see you, and I want to give you a really crisp, clear response in terms of the number of units. And what we'll do is my office will send you that email soon that gives you the details of the affordable housing that's coming on stock. It is coming on stock at a higher rate than ever. You're also seeing the city and the county aligning resources for new shelters like never before. And I want to just take a pause to remind everyone that when we just got the most recent counts of who died on our streets last year of houselessness, over 80%, it was clear that it was connected to substance abuse. So our behavioral health and mental health issues on our streets are at a level that is very uncomfortable and concerning. And this didn't happen overnight. This is one of those examples where when the state is at anywhere from 47th to 51st, when it comes to providing treatment for those experiencing mental health and behavioral health, and Portland is the place that they come to receive services, this is where we are. And it's an embarrassment. And that's why we want to make sure that it's a number one concern at our state and that it will be a big issue in the gubernatorial race. So we're all in this together. Absolutely. I will tell you that we are taking some great steps and we will get back to you. We want you to sign that lease in April, and you need to see that the policies that we're passing, which are aligned like never before, start to show up on the street. And it won't be fast enough, but it certainly needs to be methodical, incremental, and it needs to show you some movement in the right direction. So your message landed well, and we'll make sure we get back to you with the details on how many shelter beds and how much housing is going up next year. Thanks so much.
I believe in you guys. So thank you guys so much for your time. Mayor, thank you.
Derek, sorry, we're talking you to death now. This will teach you to come and testify.
No, I have no problem talking to you guys. I just know you guys have a lot of business to take care of.
And you asked some specific questions, and that information is available. And I'm sure we can get the joint office, or somebody in Commissioner Ryan's office could get the joint office to provide you their current projections based on the Metro Homeless Bond, as well as the funds that we've allocated jointly with Multnomah County specifically for shelter beds. I know they do keep this data, and they could give you more specific answers to the good questions you asked. I can tell you this, it's hundreds, both in terms of housing units coming online, 0 to low income, and it's hundreds in terms of shelter capacity, including Commissioner Ryan's Safe Street Villages that are currently in process, as well as some of the other work that we're doing around more permanent sheltering solutions. Commissioner Ryan hinted at something that is very much on my mind these days. He threw a statistic out there that is unbelievable, and it is true, which is that 86% of the 126 people who died on our streets last year had drug afflictions, 86%. And the city has historically been responsible for infrastructure, for camp cleanliness, for making sure that we work with the county on emergency shelter options and the like. And we have significantly invested in that, including just recently jointly investing an additional $40 million through our fall budget process, in addition to the much larger allocation we made during our regular budget process. But what's missing from the mix right now, and I'm just speaking for myself, not the council, is we need the governor and we need legislative leadership and we need candidates for governor to be clear about where they stand with regard to mental health and substance abuse treatment and the delivery of services.
Absolutely.
And you know, Derek, well, that the state of Oregon disinvested from mental health services, and therefore the streets have become the safety net of last resort for people in our community experiencing severe mental illness. And I know where your business is, and I know you see it up front, close and personal, and are in a position where you interact with it and deal with it on a daily basis. And the same holds true for substance abuse. Substance abuse has gotten much, much worse in our community just in the last few years. The longer people are on the streets, the more likely they are to become users of drugs like opioids and the new meth. And we are seeing the results of inattention on our streets. So that this city government stands by you. We are ready to continue to do the things that we need to do at the local level to take back our streets and to help vulnerable people on our streets into better circumstances than where they currently find themselves, to address this humanitarian crisis. But this council is no longer going to play it nice with everybody else who has an important role to play in helping ensure that we have housing, that we have access to mental health services, that we have access to substance abuse services to help us address this humanitarian crisis. So I absolutely enthusiastically would love you to stay. I would love for you to re-sign your lease. That is, of course, a business decision that you have to make. But I am actually feeling, for the first time, grains of optimism in that I am seeing a unified city council. I am seeing us work more collaboratively with our county partners than we have in the 5 years I have been here. We are starting to see nationally other mayors and other city councils speak out on the importance of state and federal interventions and support for housing and mental health and substance abuse treatment. And I do believe this will become a priority issue nationally, as it already has become a priority issue locally over the course of the next 2 years. So I do believe help is on the way, that things will improve. We've already invested heavily in the homeless piece. We've invested heavily in improving safety on our streets. We've invested heavily in livability issues, the litter, the graffiti, and the other issues that you and other small business owners and operators have said inhibit your ability to be successful as business owners and operators. This council gets it. And we want you. You're an important part of this community. You're an important part of our economy. And we absolutely see you, we hear you, and we support you.
That's great. I really appreciate your guys' time. I'm a businessman, and I went into this with a lot of optimism, and I'm going to walk away after talking to you guys with a lot of optimism. I like the way you guys engaged me. I really appreciate you guys each taking the time individually to talk to me. And I really appreciate your guys' time.
Thank you. We appreciate your being here too. Thank you.
You got it. Have a good day.
Thank you. You too.
Bye.
Keelan, next up's the consent agenda. Have any items been pulled from the consent agenda?
2 items have been pulled, 916 and 917.
Very good. They will be taken up at the end of the regular agenda. Please call the roll on the remainder of the consent agenda.
Maps.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, colleagues, I want to take a moment to thank Commissioner Hardesty for bringing forth item 925 on the consent agenda. That item accepts a grant from ODOT for safety improvements at Southwest Shattuck Road. Today, that item resonates because 9 years and 2 days ago, a pedestrian by the name of Mara Forsyth Crane was killed in a hit and run incident at that location. I'm glad to see the city finally take steps to make the space safer for Portlanders, and I appreciate Commissioner Hardesty's leadership on this matter. For these reasons and more, I vote yes on the consent agenda.
Ryan.
Aye.
Hardesty.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye, the consent agenda is adopted. To the regular agenda, please, item 927.
Adopt City of Portland investment policy.
Colleagues, I have been asked, Commissioner Rubio is away today, but she asked me if I would please read a statement on this item on her behalf. And so I'll go ahead and do that prior to getting into Bridget's remark, if I could, just so I don't forget to do this. When the City of Portland invests, we have a choice of how we meet our fiduciary duty, and our investments should align with our values. I want to thank community for reminding us of that last week. Although there's not been an explicit prohibition, our investments have, in practice, avoided the industries we heard about in testimony last week. I believe Bridget and Michael's proposed strategy is solid, and I want to thank them for meeting with our offices so that we can have this dialogue now before anything moves forward next December. I'm committed to working with my colleagues and the treasurer's team to have a midpoint check-in that includes community. And that is a statement on behalf of Commissioner Rubio. And with that, I'll turn it over to Bridget. Good morning.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. For the record, my name is Bridget O'Callaghan, and I'm Portland City Treasurer. We did have an opportunity to chat about this last week on this council meeting, so I'm not going to take up a whole lot more time. But I did want to share that I've had an opportunity to speak with Commissioner Rubio's office, and we have committed to a process of quarterly updates for the commissioner as she wants to be more engaged in this process, and we certainly welcome that. We've also had an opportunity, Commissioner Ryan, to speak with your staff about this as well, and appreciate your interest in the topic. With that, I will pause to see if there are any questions for us.
Thanks. And colleagues, just a reminder, we already heard a presentation and took testimony. We continued this item, so this is really a chance for any further questions from Bridget or her team, and then we'll call for the vote. So if anybody has any questions. Seeing none, please call the roll.
Apps.
Mr. Mayor, colleagues, I appreciate the testimony we heard last week on this item, and I also appreciate the due diligence displayed by my colleagues, Ryan and Rubio. I am satisfied that we are moving in the right direction. I realize that this policy is also a work in progress, so we can continually update it as our thinking evolves. For these reasons and more, I vote yes.
Ryan.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And I'd like to really acknowledge your office, and particularly you, Treasurer Bridget O'Callaghan, for meeting with my staff this week to go over the concerns that I raised last week in the council meeting about the future of iterations of this policy. Like, I'm not completely satisfied with the current state. However, this is where we are, and I understand that you will be, working with your consultant who will do periodic reviews of the policy. Of that in particular, we asked that the consultant provide guidance and education with regard to the discipline of environmental social governments, investing, and will seek stakeholder inputs through the city's investment advisory committee for future iterations of the report. So I'm really hopeful is what I am about the fact that we had a good conversation. This is how it starts, and the outreach that you'll be doing with our office and others to keep us along means that when you come back in December of 22, it'll be a different process, and more importantly, it'll have some different outcomes. And so I really appreciate your willingness, and because of all that, I vote aye.
Hardesty.
This is my third go round with this process, and each time I learn a bit more about really the fiduciary responsibility that you play and ensuring that our values are leading the city's investments. I really appreciated the public testimony that we heard last week. And I do want to make sure that we are not unintentionally investing in companies that either change their name or create subsidiaries that actually are in opposition to the values that the city holds. Again, work in progress. I'm grateful that there will be quarterly updates that will be available because we do need to make sure continuously that we're walking our own talk and we're not saying one thing and doing something else in the public's name. So Bridget O'Callaghan, you and Michael Montgomery, you did an excellent job I appreciated being briefed ahead of the council meeting because I asked you a lot of questions that actually came up during the council meeting. And Mayor Wheeler, I want to appreciate you taking a pause when Commissioner Rubio said, I need more. I need more information about this. This is how council should work. All of us have different expertise that we bring, but collectively, we are the best brains at the city of Portland. So I'm very happy to vote aye and look forward to seeing what's next.
Wheeler.
I vote aye. Thank you to Bridget O'Callahan, Michael Montgomery, your entire team. Great job. The resolution is adopted. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You bet. Next item, 928, a second reading.
Authorize application and accept award funds from Federal Emergency Management Agency in the amount of $1,665,000 for the Portland International Raceway Pump Station Upgrade Design Project.
Colleagues, this is a second reading. We've already heard a presentation and had opportunity for public testimony. Is there any further business on this item? Seeing none, Keelan, please call the roll.
Maps.
Aye.
Ryan.
Aye.
Hardesty.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. The ordinance is approved. 929, also a second reading.
Authorize contract with Carollo Engineers, Inc. for engineering services for the Columbia Boulevard Wastewater Treatment Plant Blower System and Building Rehabilitation Project number E11038 for $4,374,679.
Colleagues, any further business on this item? Seeing none, Keelan, please call the roll.
Maps.
Aye.
Ryan.
I was actually out there last week on a site visit, so I'm enthusiastically say aye.
Hardesty.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. The ordinance is adopted. 930, please, which is a non-emergency, it's a resolution.
Establish 2022 sale price cap for the Homebuyer Opportunity Limited Tax Exemption Program.
Commissioner Ryan.
Yes, Mayor and colleagues, I'd like to propose an amendment to the resolution. And so I just go ahead and read the resolution.
Please.
I would like to propose an amendment to the resolution to change the price cap of the annual Holtese sale price from $412,000 for the 2022 calendar year to be $430,000, which would go into effect on January 1st, 2022. This will help ensure builders are incentivized to participate in this program that increases homeownership opportunities for low to moderate income households at or below 100% median family income.
Commissioner Ryan, I second your amendment. Commissioner Maps?
I was just going to second.
Oh, very good. Any further discussion on the amendment?
Well, we do. I'd like to invite we have invited testimony, and I think there's also people signed up. So maybe we would want to hear that first.
All right. So I'll turn this over to you, to Commissioner Ryan. Do you want to hear the Bureau presentation first, or would you like to hear the invited
Let's hear our guests that have been waiting on the call.
All right. Sounds good. Why don't you go ahead and invite them up?
Okay, sounds good. I'd like to invite our first guest to speak. That's Sarah Koski. Sarah, you're on the line. And if so, the floor is yours. You have 3 minutes. Keelan, is Sarah on?
Sarah, you're on mute.
There she is. Yeah, you're
on mute, Sarah.
You have to unmute. Yeah, that's Commissioner Hardesty saying.
There we
There
go.
you go.
I apologize. I'm not used to doing this on my phone. I guess I just wanted to give my story really quickly. I was born and raised in Portland. I was a renter all my life. As we all know, rent increases kind of been a little crazy. I've been in the place I had been in for almost 10 years. And I got to the point where my rent annually would be increased like $100 a month, which was just not sustainable. I was fortunately in a car accident that was not my fault, broke my arm, which sucked, but allowed me to have a bit of a settlement. And I obviously saw that an opportunity to invest in a home would be probably in the long term in my interest. And honestly, if it weren't for that program, I would not have qualified. So, I mean, that's just my story. I can't imagine the additional expenses. I mean, as it is, like the property tax itself went up. There were, additional HOA fees went up from what was what was expected on my condo. But again, if it hadn't been for that program, I wouldn't have qualified, and I would probably, unfortunately, still be renting and paying increased rent every month. So that's pretty much it.
Sarah, thank you so much for your testimony. Thanks for calling on your phone.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Welcome. Next up is Justin Wood. Justin, could you please unmute, and the floor is yours.
Thanks, Commissioner Ryan. Hope you guys can hear me okay. So I just wanted to take a minute. So I'm one of the builders who's been using the STC waiver program and the Holte program for probably close to 20 years. For every year, we've seen this program go up at some amount. In some years, it's been quite large, been 30, 40, I think even $50,000. In some years, it's been smaller, into the single digits or teens. But I think most of us builders all plan on it going up some amount when we're looking at what we're going to do for next year. The majority of houses I build utilize the STC waiver program. And for us, if we're looking at the houses for next year, if you've all seen what's happened with the lumber market, the cost market, the labor market, everything tied to housing. You can imagine the National Home Builder said in 2021 alone, our hard input prices went up 21%. And so for us to still be able to build and sell houses to a very important buying marketplace, which is those families making at or below the median family income, it's important for us to be able to actually still bring a product to market to sell them. So I'm glad to hear Commissioner Ryan introduce that amendment, because I think that gets us closer to a number that we can actually still work with for next year. Because at 412,000, I know the majority of the houses I have planned for next year, we just won't be able to bring to market and to actually sell next year, which unfortunately pushes us further away from from being able to provide houses in that price range. Because if we can't do it for 412, then that gap of where we're able to kind of discount and supplement the SDCs to the buyers, that makes us jump our houses up to about 460 to be able to kind of cover those SDCs and get us back to a place where we're in that same price range. And so 412 really becomes 460 if we're not selling to a qualified buyer. So I just want to say thank you to all of you who we talked with over the last week, and thanks to Commissioner Ryan for the amendment. And I hope you can find your way to support it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Justin. Next up is Jardima Croker. Jardima, are you on the line? Yes, there you are. If you
yes, I am.
The floor is yours.
Yeah. Thank you, Mayor Wheeler, Commissioners Ryan, Hardesty, and Maps for allowing me to speak. I've lived in Portland for 11 years, and I've been trying to buy a house for 11 years. On June 27th, on the hottest day in history, the pipes in my rental house burst, flooding the entire house and making me houseless. I still, I've been cat sitting for the last, since that incident, and trying to buy a house, and I've entered into 4 purchase and sale agreements. The challenge that I found was finding affordable house that didn't need extensive repairs. And I had to walk away from 3 of the 4 of the houses because they failed inspection. So finding new construction that didn't need extensive repairs at a price I could afford was the final solution to my issue. And the Holt tax rebate was the final piece that made it affordable for me. Sometimes it's just $300 or $400. That's the difference between being able to buy a home or rent an apartment. I work 2 jobs and work with people that in vulnerable situations, getting their criminal records expunged for free. And as a mentor of that community here in Portland, it's important that I be able to show how we can rise up, buy affordable housing, and attain actualization. So I just want to thank you for having this program available and allowing me to speak this morning. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, Jardima. Thank you for being here. And next we have Eric Thompson. Eric, I see you're on the line. If you can unmute, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Commissioner Ryan, and all of you commissioners and the mayor. My name is Eric Thompson. I've been building homes here in Portland for about 15 years, mostly what we call infill development in Portland's close-in East Side neighborhoods. Prior to the new RIP code, and I can't applaud the city and the commissioners enough for passing that, which now allows us to build multiple homes to be built on a single lot. We were one of those builders that exclusively built larger new construction homes, basically one house per lot. I think these are what a lot of people would refer to as the McMansions that many Portlanders have objected to, and were at the root of the original RIP discussions over the past several years. With the cost of land, permits and fees, construction materials that Justin mentioned earlier, all continuing to increase, it's not uncommon for these larger single family new construction homes to now cost upwards of $1 million in today's market. So truly not affordable by any measure. With the new RIP code in place, we've 100% refocused our efforts away from these larger homes and plan on building in the upcoming year approximately 60 new smaller homes across 15 to 20 or so lots. Most of these will be priced well under Portland's median price point, which the most recent report that's come out has that at $508,000 and the average price at $571,000. We're hoping that many of these projects, unlike Justin, who spoke earlier, who's been a longtime participant in these programs, we haven't. And we're hoping to now become a big user of the program and be able to participate in the HOLTE and the SDC waiver programs so that we can sell these to exactly the type of buyer that these programs were intended. As a case in point, two of our most recent sales of this type of product were to young families where both parents worked. In both cases, one of those parents was a teacher. In one, the other parent worked in a restaurant, and in the other as a public employee actually for the city. So prior to the RIP code, these are traditionally the types of families that couldn't afford a new construction home in Portland's great close-in neighborhoods, exactly like the person testified before me. So I echo Justin's thoughts that we just can't build these houses given all the price increases at $412,000 price cap, and am in full support of Commissioner Ryan's increase that up to $430,000. And we look forward to participating and bringing a large number of homes onto the market next year that we can serve the exact type of participants that the program is shooting for. So thanks for your time, and I hope that you guys can pass this.
Thank you, Eric. I appreciate you being here this morning, all four of you, for your presentation. Mayor, that's all the invited testimony we have. I think we could hand it over to the clerk now for public testimony. I think some people have signed up.
Very good. Keelan?
We have 3 people signed up. First up is Ryan McKinster.
Good morning, Ryan.
All right. Good morning, Commissioner Ryan. Thank you. And thank you, Mayor Wheeler and Commissioner Hardesty and Commissioner Maps. For the record, my name is Ryan McKinster. I think I've spoken with most of you. I am the Director of Policy Affairs, Government Policy Affairs Director of the Home Builders Association of Metro Portland. I am actually a registered lobbyist with the City of Portland as well, so you should know that for the record. I want to keep this brief. I think my builders have spoken as well as a couple of the homeowners have taken advantage of this program, including Jardima and Sarah, can speak more eloquently to the program itself. I want to put a few points out there. First of all, I want to say thank you to this council. You were made aware somewhat at the last minute. It was kind of new to us about this issue and our concerns, and you all, made the effort. As Commissioner Hardesty said earlier, you took the effort to make a pause to hear from stakeholders, and I truly believe and agree, I think, with Commissioner Hardesty that that's the way this should work. No matter the timing, I apologize, it was a little last minute, it's when it came to our attention. So I really do appreciate that, and the time you made for all of us to speak to you. That's going above and beyond, and we really appreciate the representation you give to your constituents. One thing I just want to point out, a couple high level issues. Number one, since this number, the 412 that was previously under consideration, if the amendment offered by Commissioner Ryan does not pass, since that time, 12 months ago, production costs on houses have gone up 17.2%. So that's across labor, lumber, other things like that. And that's at this point If we look back to last June, that number is much higher, which I'm sure you're all aware of the price of lumber. I think it was coated in gold at one time for the prices we were seeing. So, so that is a concern. We expect lumber to start going up again. There is actually at the federal level, the tariff on softwoods out of Canada has doubled. Although that's not a majority of our market, it's a large enough number that will affect the commodity price. And so they are expected to rise again in the first quarter of 2022. Just along those lines, I want to point out another issue. There are two parts we're talking about here. We're talking about the Pulte program, which is basically the property tax waiver program that limits the property tax to the actual land instead of the developed value of that land, which is very valuable. But not all of our builders do that, and that number is capped for us that are in the open market at 100 units, and so that's important. We want to keep that pipeline full. But the other thing is this number is also coupled, the sales cap price also coupled with the SDC waiver program, which is very valuable to market builders, whether or not they're working in the Pulte program or not, because they may not be working in the Pulte program, but they can still offer that $25,000 to $30,000 discount directly to consumer. So as some previous testimony said, could move that from, 460,000 down to 430 or 450 down to 420. So I think that's very valuable. Finally, I just wanted to say that we really appreciate your time on this, and want to say that we do support, my industry, HBA, supports the amendment as offered from Commissioner Ryan, and I really hope you can all join us in supporting that. Thank you.
Next up, we have Douglas McLeod.
Elin, is Douglas here?
It looks like it. Douglas, you're muted. Are you able to unmute? Douglas, can you hear us? You're muted.
Sorry, folks.
Yeah, if you could start over.
Apologies, I'm down at the coast. I think it's a hand-cranked internet system here. So first of all, I want to thank, and this is not perfunctory, I really do want to thank Councilman Ryan and MAPS for pivoting super fast and getting us in to speak to staff and have themselves present and listen to the builders and others on this issue. It's not perfunctory. I know it's a super busy time of the year. I really appreciate you taking the time. And for you folks who weren't able to do that, I know it's just been super busy. So thanks very much. I don't want to speak too long because I think I'd just be reiterating what other builders have said, which is the program is getting squeezed so much that it just doesn't make sense to really pursue this unless we get some higher numbers. It's funny, I think there's some issues on process that I won't get into, but I sort of found out this number last week, more or less by accident. I have a development that I'm currently planning, and as soon as I saw that the number was not going to increase, I called my designer and I said, stop, because I don't really know what I'm going to do. If the number doesn't change, my program will change and there'll be less middle income housing. I've been working for 20 years in real estate, 15 years almost exclusively with new construction builders, and I've been bird dogging lots for years for folks who use this program, and I know the numbers pretty darn well. And unless the Housing Bureau can keep this number sort of tracking the larger market, it'll go away. That's all I have to say.
Next up, we have Michael Mitchoff.
Can you hear me okay?
Loud and clear.
All right, great. First, I'd like to obviously say thank you for your time this morning. And as a citizen of Portland, as a neighborhood resident of Westmoreland, I first want to say good job and thank you for the efforts you've done most recently at Westmoreland Park, cleaning it up. The whole neighborhood is absolutely thrilled. So good for you guys. We seriously appreciate you. You're doing a good job. Keep it up. So separately, my name's Mike Mitchoff. I have a small infill building company here in Portland called Portland Houseworks. About 7 years ago, we kind of shifted or modified what we build to build smaller than average houses to try to kind of hit some entry level / market rate affordable houses. I have lots of experience in building. We probably build 15 to 20 houses a year, with the intention of, I think right now we have close to 60 on the books for the next couple of years, given the provisions of the residential infill project. So I have a tendency to ramble, so I'm just going to read this little thing that I put together so that so that it's a good use of your time. So first of all, the Holte and SDC waiver program, it's a great program for everyone involved, but it's only a good program if builders can deliver. With constant cost pressure on materials, labor, and land, it's getting consistently harder and less attractive to deliver. We count on the annual increase within the program that reasonably accounts for the increased cost in order for us to participate. And I know I speak for most of the people in the building community because I run the PBUD, the Portland Infill Builders division of the Portland Metro Portland Home Builders Association. So I talk to these people all the time. So the goal of this is home ownership. Given everything we know about the cost of constructing, the time involved during the process, local pricing that current buyers are experiencing, why would we further hamstring the ownership opportunities for people that want to buy into our community? The program has consistently raised the pricing threshold for the 7.5 years that I've participated or been willing to participate in the program. So I guess my question would be, why would we not increase it now? So I'll take your comments, or that wraps up my testimony, and I'll take your comments offline or questions if you have any.
Okay, Keelan, that's the last testimony.
Yes, that completes public testimony.
Okay, Mayor. Back to you. I think we have to vote on the amendment first and dialogue. Anyway, I'll pass it back to you.
I also want to make sure, Commissioner Ryan, did staff have anything they wanted to present on this? Or are we good?
We have staff here to answer questions.
Very good.
Program Manager Dory Van Brockel is here, as well as the Policy and Planning Manager Matthew Scheibold, as well as Director Callahan.
Okay, good. Commissioner Hardesty has a comment or question. Commissioner?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to ask Director Callahan what her reasoning was to not actually raise the threshold, because I'd like to know that before I am asked to vote on the amendment.
Thank you, Commissioner Hardesty, and good morning, Mayor and Commissioner Shannon Callahan from the Portland Housing Bureau. Commissioner, the overall rationale for our homeownership programs is trying to target lower incomes at 100% AMI, and especially focus on communities of color where there is a minority homeownership gap. And the program itself is a wonderful program, and it is subject to economic forces. And what we're seeing is really a mismatch between the costs of housing and people's incomes. And so, that problem is going to exist no matter where you set the price cap for the program. We typically do a modest increase. I think the year before last, we increased it $7,000, and the year before that, $10,000. So it is traditional that we do raise that. But we are at a overall crux of an issue with income inequality and rising homeownership rates, costs of homeownership. So this is going to bleed into, frankly, all of our programs that affect the private market. And so that was some of our rationale, coupled with the fact of recent changes to RIP and Better Housing by Design. But what the commissioner is proposing is a modest increase of, I think, just over 4% from the previous year's price cap. And as the development community, I think who were on the call, we did have a communication lapse with reaching out to our stakeholders, and I apologize to them. I will say that our Bureau, as many families and households, are experiencing other pandemic-related challenges. However, that was our rationale, Commissioner.
Thank you very much, Director Callahan, because I share that same concern. What we know is wages are stagnant and everything else is becoming very, very expensive. And I just want to make sure that we are not making the possibility of home ownership available. What I hope is this change does not reduce the number of people who have the ability to buy homes at this lower end of the home ownership scale. As someone who spent the last 14 years on the Board of Human Solutions, I know how difficult it is to build truly affordable housing. So I don't know who can answer this question, but I guess what is the outcome of this change? What is the income that would be required for this change as compared to what was being proposed before?
The income level remains the same, Commissioner. So overall, the income of a buyer has to be at 100% AMI or less, which for a family of four is $96,900. And so the difference in the pricing is just based on who can afford. First of all, there's availability of the units, and then there's also affordability to the household. And so I think, as you heard, what that may do is push folks who have larger down payments and push folks out who have smaller down payments into this program. It is a small program overall. There's only 100 applications we can approve each year. And I think where we are at with this program and all of our homeownership programs really is needing to reassess where incomes are and where the realities of the market. I mean, it is true. The median family home price has gone up over $100,000 in the last year. That's astronomical. And so I think you'll see from us coming back at you, talking with you through the budget process about some realignments of programming and looking at the underlying purpose of the programming, and also trying to realign some of these programs, as you heard, with some of the new bonus programs that you've passed related to RIP and Better Housing by Design. And so I would assume that in the next year and a half or the next year before we come back to price set, we'll have a better idea of who's buying at the increased rate and what some of those factors are that we should consider.
I mean, thank you so much, Director Callahan. I think it's a sober reality about where we are at this moment. So I just want to make sure that we are crystal clear about kind of the choices and options we have ahead of us. And as you say, we're talking 100 homes a year. But I already know that there's not one zip code in the city of Portland where Black people are not cost burdened, not one in the entire city. And there's not one zip code where a white family starting off can actually afford a home without being cost burdened. So until we deal with the fundamental income inequality that exists, it feels like we're just we're using a teaspoon to stop the Titanic from sinking. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Commissioner Mapps.
I just wanted to essentially underscore Commissioner Hardesty's concerns. It seems like in the context of affordable housing here in Portland, we are caught in an increasingly difficult structural problem. Housing prices have gone up extraordinarily. Incomes have not risen analogously. So I do see a coming crisis coming towards the city. If it's not already here, I do think that it is time for this council to engage in a discussion about how we can bring more affordable housing to the city, especially home ownership opportunities for folks on the lower end of the spectrum. And I just really want to encourage Commissioner Ryan and the folks over at Housing to launch that discussion, because I think it can't happen soon enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any further discussion before I start calling the roll on the amendment in the main motion? Seeing none, Keelan, please call the roll on the amendment.
Maps,
I want to thank everyone who testified today. I want to also express my appreciation for our colleague Dan Ryan for bringing this ordinance forward. I'm a big fan of this program. I think it's really important to the city of Portland for many reasons. One, it promotes home ownership, which is also the most effective way to promote wealth accumulation amongst Portlanders. So I want to see more programs like this. And I look forward to our future conversations about how we can adjust this program so that we can continue to help low-income Portlanders and medium-income Portlanders, achieve the American dream, which is to buy a home. And for these reasons and more, I vote yes.
Ryan?
Yes, thank you. Colleagues, I'm going to go ahead and do my remarks in the amendment since this is kind of the heart of the matter of the issue. Colleagues, I just want to talk. The ordinance before us today is about utilizing the city's HOLTE program, a program that we want to keep active. Earlier, it was mentioned this program is intended to serve and facilitate home ownership for low to moderate income households at 100% median family income or below. Utilization of this program on the annual basis, nonprofit developers typically sold between 20 and 30 homes to qualified buyers. The builders that are here, that we heard from many today, and we heard from those consumers as well, who participated, sold between 75 to 85 homes to qualified buyers annually. And we want to keep that going. We also learned how the dramatic increase in median home sale prices coupled with significant increases in material and labor costs in the supply chain have forced builders to choose whether to participate in the program or not, and whether to build larger homes and sell in the open market. In contrast, the nonprofit developers utilize subsidies from Portland Housing Bureau, the county, and the state to offset the construction and development cost of building these homes that they sell on an average, or about 100K less than those by the for-profit builders. The point is, this is a holistic program and we'll keep studying it as discussed earlier. But remember, there's a supply in the housing equation. Just tell a little story about last night. My spouse likes to collect vinyl albums. And I always just assumed that, say, a Michael Jackson album would be worth more than, say, a Beck album. But the fact is there's tons of Michael Jackson albums out there, so the price point's rather low. Whereas Beck, who I had to remind myself who that was, because there's no supply, I found out that this vinyl album is worth a lot of money. That's just a little example that the simple equation of supply and demand does go together, and you can't look at one without the other. So at this time, I'm not willing to take a risk in seeing less productivity from our partners who are willing to participate in this program. We need them in this equation. Our city's in a crisis and government can't do it alone. Our affordable housing shortage is influenced by our lack of supply, and we need the builders from the private community to participate and be all in. Colleagues, let me be clear. If the goal of this program is to increase the number of low to moderate eligible home buyers, we are doing that well, and it'll keep the pace, and we must raise the threshold so that the builders are incentivized to participate. If our goal is to create different outcomes and home ownership opportunities for communities of color, then we need to think differently about that program and how it is utilized and what are our true North Star goals. My point is, and it was discussed earlier, this is way more complex than just this one amendment. However, this amendment is a part of the equation. My office will be reviewing this program with the Housing Bureau at greater depth over the next year to better understand its historical data and opportunities. And it is one of my main focuses with the Housing Bureau to increase generational wealth and have more home buyers from those communities that haven't been at the table. Today, our charge is to strike a balance between providing home sales, price cap for this program that is still accessible to low and moderate income home buyers, while also incentivizing the home builders to utilize the program instead of having them leave the program and go back to building larger homes at much higher prices. The builders have significantly increased the participation in this program, and we have more work to do to improve outcomes for racial equity. I'm glad you're at the table. The enthusiasm you've shown around this amendment means that you'll be at the table as we look at these bigger systemic challenges. We need you. This means there are compromises, and we'll need to just continue to stay at the table to figure out how we get to our North Star goals. This resolution also highlights an even bigger change for City Council in the coming years to more closely evaluate how to address this growing gap between the increases in median home sales and the lagging wages for median family incomes, and what this means for the program and how it will meet its intended goals. With all that said, I'm very excited that we've had a lot of progress over the last few days. I know it's a busy time of year to have these meetings, and I really thank the builder community and my colleagues and everyone that we've had dialogue with from the Housing Bureau about this issue over the last few days. I appreciate it. I vote aye.
Hardesty.
Building the 100 units a year for the multi-program is a priority for the city of Portland. It's also a priority that people who live, work, worship here are able to afford to live here. That is not the case today. This program won't solve that by itself. We know that we will have reports coming back around many of the Housing Bureau programs. And we also will be deciding what the Housing Bureau's role will be in the future. The reality is that that is a decision as a council that we will have to make, and we will make next year. I will support this proposal. I think the case has been made for the fact that honestly, we're not building housing. This is not middle income housing, right? It just isn't. And we should stop telling people it is, right? This is housing for professionals who can actually afford two incomes to be able to purchase a home. This is what this is. Two, as you said, teachers, two professionals. We still are not even putting a dent in housing that low income people can afford. And I wish we as a council would stop pretending that we're making opportunities available for low income people, because we just really aren't yet. I support the amendment. I vote yes.
Wheeler.
I want to thank Commissioner Ryan for bringing this amendment forward. I think it's responsive to some of the legitimate concerns that he heard, and this furthers the progress towards more housing, as we heard from some of our invited testimony this morning. I strongly support it. I vote aye. The amendment is approved. To the main motion, any further discussion? Seeing none, please call the roll, Keelan, on the main motion as amended.
Maps.
Aye.
Ryan.
Aye.
Hardesty.
By the time we do this next year, we will have much more information. Aye.
Wheeler.
I vote aye. The resolution is adopted as amended. Next item is also a second reading, 931, please.
Approve application under the multiple unit limited tax exemption program under the inclusionary housing program for the Gabriel, located at 4525 Southwest California Street.
Colleagues, any further discussion on this item? Seeing none, Keelan, please call the roll.
Maps.
Aye.
Ryan.
Aye.
Hardesty.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. The ordinance is adopted. Back to the consent agenda, item 916, pulled from the consent calendar. Please read the item, please.
A property damage claim of Jennifer Ginger in the sum of $6,144 resulting from a motor vehicle collision involving the Portland Police Bureau.
Is there staff here to discuss this?
Yes.
Very good. Why don't we hear testimony first, and that might help focus the conversation. Who pulled this item, please?
Mark Porras.
Is Mr. Porras here?
Yes.
All right, Mr. Porras, 3 minutes, name for the record, please.
Hi, for the record, my name is Mark Porras. I use he, him pronouns, and I live in Northeast Portland. I asked to have this item pulled from the consent agenda because it's yet another mysterious settlement that's attributed to the Police Bureau. The settlement amount is above the $5,000 threshold, and it requires City Council sign off. I testified on December 1st and asked that Council put all settlements above $5,000 on the regular agenda by default, both for transparency and to allow public comment. And I'm asking you again to do that. Please put the settlements on the regular agenda and open them up for public comment. Regarding the item from December 1st meeting that was pulled from the consent agenda, we heard from a city attorney, I think, who, she didn't identify themselves for the record, tell us about this $25,000 settlement paid out to a protester who was arrested for not dispersing when an order was made. And in the process of being arrested, she was pushed over and suffered an injury to her thumb that required surgery. Now, that's obviously not the whole story since the city decided to fork over $25,000 for police behavior, but it's something. It's a glimmer of transparency. So I'm just asking you again, please put all settlements on the regular agenda from here on out. And I'm interested in hearing about this particular incident. Thanks.
Thank you. Joseph, could you give us some information on this, please?
Yeah. Yes. So this claim involves a motor vehicle collision near 6461 Southeast Thorburn Street on February 29th, 2020 at approximately 6 a.m. Portland Police Bureau officer was en route to assist another officer pursuing a wanted subject. The PPB officer was approaching a corner while heading westbound on Southeast Thorburn Street when the vehicle slid and hit Jennifer Ginger's 2014 Volkswagen Jetta parked on the side of the street. It was dark and raining at the time of the collision, and the parked vehicle was unoccupied. The vehicle was determined to be a total loss, and her insurance carrier pursued subrogation in this matter and provided evidence of damages in the amount of $6,144.04.
Thank you, colleagues. Is there any further testimony on this item, Keelan?
No.
Colleagues, any questions? Very good. Please call the roll.
Maps?
Aye.
Ryan?
Aye.
Hardesty?
Aye.
Wheeler?
Aye. The ordinance is adopted. Item 917 was also pulled from the consent agenda.
Pay settlement of Dmitry Stoyanov bodily injury lawsuit for the sum of $100,000 involving the Portland Police Bureau.
How many people do we have signed up?
2 people signed up.
Very good. 3 minutes each. Name for the record, please.
First up, we have Mark Porras, who pulled the item.
Thank you.
Hello, me again. This is Mark Porras. I use he, him pronouns, and I live in Northeast Portland. This is another item that was pulled from the consent agenda. Commissioners, you and your staff are the ones who decide whether something goes on the regular agenda or the consent agenda. And none of you moved to put this on the regular agenda. 82% of Portlanders voted to create a new police oversight board to deal with issues like this, to hopefully keep dangerous cops like Damerville and Begoni away from community members. 82% of Portlanders likely would have decided that, yeah, maybe we should talk about this incident and settlement at the next council meeting. It feels like City Council, on the other hand, is just hoping that this one would go away. Maybe you think there's just a few bad apples in PPB, or there's nothing you can do because our current system of accountability isn't working and these cops aren't going to face consequences anyway. We have no way of knowing what you're thinking when you allow police misconduct and brutality to slip under the public's radar. A couple weeks ago, while approving Aaron Cantu's $125,000 settlement for being shot in the head with a flashbang by PPB and suffering a traumatic brain injury, Commissioner Mapp said, "The city has learned from this incident, and we will continue to learn from how the protests of 2020 were handled as we continue to investigate those." And well, here's your next learning opportunity, which comes at the expense of the health and welfare of an innocent community member who is simply expressing his First Amendment rights. That's all I have today.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Dan Handelman.
Good morning, Mayor and council members. This is Dan Handelman. I use he, him pronouns. I'm with the group Portland Cop Watch. First, I want to echo Mr. Porras's call for particularly items where police officers are interacting directly with members of the public from the consent agenda. They should all be on the regular agenda. I'm pretty sure that Mayor Adams made that a policy when he was in office, and I'd like to see that put back in place. This incident seems to be an incident that can be read as part of the political bias that's being investigated right now by the Portland Police. We talked about this again with the Aaron Cantu protest about how the officers all had their backs turned to right-wing protesters who were carrying guns, and they were known to be carrying guns because they wouldn't go into the gun-free zone. In this case, the officers were trying to grab a sign that said "Register to vote here," and the political factions that seem to want people not to register to vote tend to be right wing, and the officers may say they thought that the sign was a weapon, but that is purely subjective as well. I'm sure there are plenty of people carrying picket signs. this is the one that said register to vote here. We now have racked up over $500,000 in settlements for the protests that happened in between 2017 and 2020, and that tabs keeps going up and up. We understand that there's a self-funded insurance pool of money that the city has, but that comes from taxpayer money in the first place. And we shouldn't be looking at these cases as just the cost of doing business. This is, as Mr. Porras noted, an opportunity for us to make sure that these things don't happen again. And of course, when the city settles, or even if it was a jury award, nothing necessarily happens to the officers involved. The Willamette Week said that Officer Damerville, who was one of the officers in this case, is being represented by outside counsel when being sued for this incident. So I'm not sure where that fits into the settlement, but that's an interesting development. In terms of the cost of doing business, we should also note that there have been 8 shootings by the Portland Police this year. That's the largest number in 16 years, and 4 of them have been fatal. And you paid out very large sums of money to 2 families who lost their loved ones earlier this year, and that's another thing that really has to come back into control. And then 2, I was through my hat with Peace and Justice Works, our parent group from Portland Cop Watch, testified last week about the investments policy that you voted on this morning. And I wrote to each of you and said, we really need to get these things in writing. There are pieces of the DOJ settlement agreement that are written down and yet aren't fully being implemented the way that at least the community interpreted them. But still, just having promises from the treasurer that they're not going to invest in, say, nuclear weapons is not satisfactory. And like with the police, if you just say, well, we're just going to trust that everything's going to be okay, and then something happens down the line, you're still going to be liable for it. So, if they invest in like a major arms manufacturer and there's a war that kills innocent civilians, like happened in Afghanistan, the city council is indirectly responsible for that by investing in drone companies. So we should stop letting the police get away with this. The money should be coming out of the police fund instead of the general fund and the insurance fund. And to the extent possible, like they did in Colorado, we should be looking at ways to make the individual officers have to pay out of their own pockets. So I'm just hoping that the city council takes all these points into consideration, and thank you for your time.
Yeah, Dan, thank you for your comments, and Derek, thank you for your comments too. And I'll let you know what my thinking is on this. I don't speak for the whole council, but when I took office, I asked specifically about these issues of settlements. And the questions that you are raising and that Derek has raised go well beyond the scope of the settlement. The settlement, as you're well aware, is a negotiated agreement between the city and the directly impacted parties, often through their attorneys or through their insurance carriers. By the time it gets to us for this action, the question is, do we accept that agreed upon settlement or do we not accept that agreed upon settlement? You both raised important but other issues not directly related to the settlement. We have other ways of engaging around police practices, behavior, use of force, discipline that are also public processes. Of course, the CRC reviews all of these questions around use of force. They have the opportunity, if they so choose, to act. OIR Group has been repeatedly funded by the city council to review specific use of force cases, and they bring that information to the city council in a public forum. So I want to be clear, just because we are addressing important settlement issues here and negotiated settlements at that, that does not mean the rest of the issue goes away or that it's being swept under the carpet or anything else. It just means that when these come to council and they show up on the consent agenda, what is narrowly being discussed today is the question of the settlement. Do we agree to the settlement or not agree to the settlement? Your broader point is well taken, that each of these cases requires a deeper look in terms of policy and in terms of what happened and how things happened, how they unfolded. But I just want to be clear that is somewhat separate to the question of whether or not we accept the settlement. So that is my thinking with regard to these particular issues. If my counsel were to override me on that, I would certainly comply. But I believe that we have the correct formula here when we're talking about negotiated settlements. I believe we also have invited testimony for this item. Am I correct, legal counsel?
Yes, Mayor.
Do you want to take it from here, Mallory?
Sure, I can do that. My name is Mallory Beebe. I'm a deputy city attorney. I represented the city in this case, as well as one of the officers. This case stems from a September 28th, 2020 protest that occurred at Kenton Park in North Portland. Mr. Stoyanov, the plaintiff, was gathered in the park with other protesters holding a sign on a tall pole. Portland Police Bureau officers determined that the pole could be used as a weapon and attempted to take the pole. Mr. Stoyanov alleged that during the interaction with PPB, officers used excessive force on him, and he also alleged that he was unlawfully arrested. Mr. Stoyanov filed a lawsuit in federal court against the city, as well as two individually named officers alleging excessive force, assault, battery, wrongful arrest, and other violations. Given the risk that there could be an adverse jury verdict, which would include or could include the payment of Mr. Stoyanov's attorney fees, the parties negotiated a settlement in October of 2021. The parties have agreed upon a settlement amount of $100,000, which includes attorney's fees to resolve this lawsuit. The city attorney's office, as well as risk management, recommend that the city council approve the settlement. And Mr. Stoyanov's counsel, one of his attorneys, Franz Bruggemeyer, is here as well as possibly Mr. Stoyanov. I didn't see him, but I will now turn it over. They have asked to address council, so I will turn it over to Mr. Bruggemeyer for any remarks that he would like to make.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Beebe, and thank you for all of your work in helping this case come to a resolution. Thank you to Mark Porras and Dan Handelman for their testimony. And hello and good morning to the City Council and the City staff. And thank you for letting me speak with you today on behalf of Mr. Stoyanov. My name is Franz Bruggemeyer. I use he or they pronouns. I'm one of the attorneys for Mr. Stoyanov, along with Jim McCandlish and Juan Chavez. I will be semi-brief, but I also want to give voice to what Mr. Stoyanov experienced and some of the issues that we've seen in protests in general and in this case. I will be showing some videos. I think that I have the ability to share my screen. If I have any problems, I will definitely let you know. And I want to do that because I want to show, what Mr. Stoyanov experienced, and also make sure that these violent acts by police are seen and acknowledged by the city and the public. But first, I want to really briefly tell a quick hypothetical story about just to kind of get a feel for what some of the legal issues are involved and how we might feel about a similar police conduct that Mr. Stoyanov experienced, but in a slightly different context. So let's imagine I was walking through Chapman Square, and I have a book, and let's say it's Ursula K. Le Guin's The word for world is forest. And I'm looking at it, and I'm like, out loud, I just say, wow, this is an amazing book, this book. And an officer sees me stopped there just admiring my book, and he thinks, well, I was told to stop people from having weapons in the park. And I've seen a book used as a weapon before. Someone can hit someone with the book. And so I'm going to stop that person and take the book before they can hurt someone. And maybe he sees me and he just doesn't like me. Maybe he sees me and doesn't like the way I look, the book that I'm reading, whatever. As long as he has a legal justification to stop me, he can do that, right? Regardless of what the other underlying circumstances are. So Portland City Code prohibits people from possessing weapons in parks. And a weapon in a park is described as either an object designed to cause physical harm and can actually carry that out. And it lists guns and knives and swords and tear gas canisters and tasers and all kinds of things that are designed to injure people. It also, a weapon is prohibited from being in a park if that thing, anything, is carried with the intent to threaten or cause physical harm to a person. So that requires, people to show an intent to use that weapon or that object as a weapon. So I've got my book, and the officer approaches me and stops me and grabs my book, tries to take it from me. And obviously I'm going to be surprised because that's weird. And he just keeps telling me that if I refuse to let him steal it and take it, that he's going to arrest me for interfering with a police officer. And that crime that's a crime if a person prevents an officer from performing their lawful duties, or if the person refuses to obey a lawful order. The crime also explicitly says that it does not apply when a person engages in passive resistance. So I'm standing there, I'm just standing, holding my book. This cop is trying to take it from me. I refuse. His supervisor comes over, he pepper sprays me, and then another officer throws me to the ground and kicks and knees me in the ribs. I am then arrested for just interfering with a police officer, right? Refusing to obey a lawful order. The problem there is that there was no lawful order. He has no right to take that book from me. He has no lawful reason to actually stop me because I'm not doing anything wrong. And I say that in a way to make the point that that's exactly what happened to Mr. Stoyanov on September 28th, 2020. At just past 9 p.m., he was at the announced gathering place for protesters before they were going to march in protest against police violence and in support of Black lives. The protest hadn't even really started. People were just milling around the park. Mr. Stoyanov was there because he wanted to protest police violence, particularly police violence against Black people. He was also there to encourage people to register to vote and to help them do that. He had a sign that said, "Vote, register here," and it had a hand-drawn logo in support of the Black Lives Matter movement, and he was wearing a Black Lives Matter shirt. And while that is a national movement, it is extremely relevant in Portland, where data shows that Portland Police Bureau's use of force, traffic stops, searches, seizures, and arrests are disproportionately directed at Black and other community members of color. I'll also point out before I show the video that the narrative that the police, Portland police and the city seem to want everyone to believe is that there are whole groups of good protesters and whole groups of bad protesters during the uprising last year, and at any particularly left-wing protest, and particularly that those who were demonstrating at night last year were all one mass of bad and violent protesters, and that the police only used force and weapons against the bad criminal protesters because they had to. That's not the reality. The police used chemical weapons that are banned in war and less lethal impact munitions on all sorts of individuals doing all sorts of things. They used those weapons against people in the streets chanting. They gassed people in their homes, unhoused people who happened to be residing where PPB decided to use those weapons. PPB used so much force, much of it unconstitutional, because it was not directed at individuals against whom the law would find justified. There were over 6,000 reported uses of force. There was so much unconstitutional force by PPB that it became normalized and expected by the protesters as just what happens to you when you attend a protest, regardless of what you actually do at the protest, including having force used against you just for standing there, for chanting, for even following orders to disperse. You have force used against you while you are following police orders. That is not okay and acceptable under a constitution that protects our freedom of speech and the right to be free from excessive police force. And it's certainly not okay for a city like Portland. As you can see in the video, I was just talking about the good and bad protester narrative that is not true. You couldn't ask for a more stereotypical peaceful protester than Mr. Stoyanov on that night, while he was standing in a park holding a cardboard sign on a PVC pole so that he was able to have the sign above everyone's head because he wanted to help people register to vote, right? Yet on that day, police found a way to justify attacking the stereotypical peaceful protester with a sign based on some combination of outright illegal actions, not understanding their legal authority, not understanding or not respecting people's constitutional rights, illegal orders, just plain malice, failure to stop other officers from violating people's rights and stop other officers from committing criminal assaults. But that's what we saw throughout the protests last year. The police would wrongfully and unconstitutionally believe that they could do something, they would do it and violate people's rights, and then nothing would happen to them and they would not be held accountable and they would go out and do it again the next day. When Portland police got to Kenton Park on September 28th, they did not announce that the gathering was an unlawful assembly, nor could they have declared it to be because people were just standing around in a park. The Portland police said that they were there to seize weapons and find other violations of park city codes. The incident commander that day told the sergeants to do that, to look for weapons and seize them. And the sergeants told the officers to do that. But again, things are only weapons if they are designed specifically to be weapons or they are being used as a weapon. So I'm going to show the first of probably 3 angles of the short incident. Let's see. Should be able to share the sound. Are you all able to see the video on the screen? Okay, thank you, Ms. Beebe. I see your head nodding.
You know you can do this and stuff without all your gear on. Hey, do you like Patriot?
So Mr. Stoyanov is the man holding the pole with the sign in the kind of left center of the screen.
You can ask a little louder. The fuck out of here! You should just start beating people while you're not tired. Instead of waiting until later tonight, that would be a good idea. You got him out of there. Go quit your job, dipshit! Get a real fucking career. You guys be quiet. You're the cops with the highest paying job. Don't give me. This is my problem. Register to vote. Move back. Move back. Register to vote, sir. Move back. Fuck! What the fuck is wrong with you? Jesus Christ, man. Move back. Move back. Move back, please. Move back. Are you okay with your job?
So before I play the next video, I just want to say, just kind of generally, that many people that were in the streets last year were out there because they want real public safety. They want a city that doesn't allow its public servants to abuse their power and abuse, hurt, and kill people. They want systems that support people in the community and help them to heal and be healthy and safe. And they want public money to fund public services and servants who provide that help. They do not want public servants to act like an occupying army that does whatever it wants with no accountability. The people in the streets wanted an end to police violence and want accountability for the harms done by those police officers. They want to know that the city does not believe and does not allow police to be above the law, but instead what they see is that the city allows PPB to act above the law and beyond the law. If I were to do what those officers were to do to someone in a park, I would be committing a felony assault with a group of friends who are also assaulting the person. Similarly, there's no difference here that the police had no legal justification for taking Mr. Stoyanov's sign. They had no legal justification for attacking and arresting him. He was arrested just for interfering with an officer, and that charge was dismissed at arraignment. So I'll show another angle that shows a little bit more about what happened before the incident where Mr. Stoyanov was attacked. I'm sorry, this is just another angle. The next one will be give a little bit more context of what else was going on. I just want to point out a few things that we saw in the videos so far. The officer who had the pepper spray and pepper sprayed another person before he pepper sprayed Mr. Stoyanov is actually the sergeant in charge of the rapid response squad in the park that night. He was the one that ordered the officers to arrest Mr. Stoyanov for having a flimsy PVC pole with a cardboard sign on it. What you might have also seen or not seen in that video was that Mr. Stoyanov was standing holding his pole, the pole with the sign on it. He was not moving. He did not walk away from the officers. He did not move towards or against the officers. The movement that he did do was being pushed and pulled by other people. just want to briefly talk about what under PPP directives, what allows an officer to use pepper spray against a person is if that person is engaged in physical resistance to a lawful police objective and performs or enacts a physical attempt to evade that officer's lawful control. Again, what the officers were doing had no legal justification. What they continued to do to abuse and arrest him had no legal justification. Sergeant Damerville, the one with the pepper spray, who was in charge of the RRT squad, he instructed the officers that they should take weapons from people, which included shields, bats, and knives, and anything that could be used as a weapon. Again, any object can be used as a weapon. City code specifies that for an object not designed to be a weapon in a park, it has to be shown to be being used as one. When the officers tried to take Mr. Stoyanov's pole and sign from him, they threatened to arrest him for interfering with an officer. But again, he had done nothing to refuse a lawful order or interfere with what police were doing. Finally, in the next video, I want you to look at the people around a tent and some tables who are providing medical services or food to people. There's a family in the medical tent. There are people eating food when the officers approach Mr. Stoyanov and attack him.
Are we supposed to be seeing something? Oh, there we go. Okay.
Thanks. Yeah, sorry, it was taking me a while. The officer that you see with the orange strap across his chest is Officer Bagoni. He's the one that takes Mr. Stoyanov down and knees or kicks him in the ribs. What we've seen there when the officers believed that they could take a weapon, what they believed was a weapon, or thought that they could justify as a weapon from Mr. Stoyanov, relied on what we saw a lot last summer and in the protests, where police consistently and improperly rely on the actions of other people at other times and places and dates to justify why they use force against people, against crowds, and those people have nothing to do with those other people who maybe previously used a pole 3 days late before, against police or in an unlawful way. We also see, so to be clear, the Constitution does not allow for police to do that. Only actions of the person that they use force on in the relevant circumstances at that time that they use the force can be relied on to justify lawful use of force or seizures. The law and the Constitution does also not allow for group punishment. It does not allow for the police to punish people whose speech is not what they like, what they don't like, or to arrest, let alone punish people for expressing themselves. Mr. Stoyanov on September 28th knew that he was doing nothing wrong. He was in a park where it was lawful for him to be. He was holding a sign about registering to vote on a flimsy PVC pole so that his message could be seen above everyone's heads. The PPB officers approached him, tried to take his sign, and he passively resisted that unlawful police action by keeping a hold of his sign. And for that, he was attacked and arrested. For daring to passively refuse to allow police to do whatever illegal thing they wanted, he was attacked. This settlement allows PPB in the city to avoid going to trial because there is a risk that the jury would award a much greater amount to Mr. Stoyanov, and to avoid the news being filled with all of the details that come out during trial of just how brutal and out of control the PPB police are. The city also gets to avoid the cost of going to trial, which makes sense. The city and PPB don't want to spend city resources just to have a jury say definitively that this was an unlawful and violent attack against someone passively exercising their right to speak. And Mr. Stoyanov wants what little justice that the settlement affords him. It is a silent but not explicit acknowledgement by the city that what the police did to Mr. Stoyanov was not okay, that what they did was not constitutional and not acceptable. I think we've forgotten, after seeing hundreds of videos of illegal police violence by PPB during the uprising for Black Lives and against police violence last year, that is neither normal nor acceptable, and certainly not constitutional for police to use the amounts, kinds, and ways that they used force last year against protesters. It's not new. We just need to look at the city settlement with Mr. Cantu a few weeks ago after being sued, after the city was sued when a police officer shot Mr. Cantu in the head with a less lethal riot control munition in 2018. Mr. Stoyanov showed up at the protest last year not knowing too much about the issues, but he knew that there were lots of problems with policing. And he was there to learn about the issues from others there, and he did. He also learned how common police violence against protesters is. He went there because he thought that it was important to help people understand their rights to vote, to how to register to vote. And through the months of going to protests, he helped register about 100 people. And he had discussions with all kinds of people about their voting rights, how to register, whether they can register. He wants to make sure that everyone knows that he did not take anyone's information. He just helped them to register to vote. He wasn't collecting anything from anyone. He also went to those protests with his wife and kids. They went to learn about the issues and to show that they weren't okay with the way that the police act, particularly towards Black and other people of color. Mr. Stoyanov and his family continue to learn from and support the community in every way that they can to create a strong and safe community. One of the things that can create a stronger and safer community is accountability. Police acts of violence against protesters harms the community in ways beyond the actual physical harm, including eroding trust in police and the city to do what is expected and needed. When Mr. Stoyanov was serving in the Marines in Iraq, he knew that he should not follow illegal orders, and he knew that he had a duty to report the illegal activities of his colleagues. And he expects Portland police to do the same. But what he saw and experienced showed him a Sergeant Damerville, who ordered officers to do something that they had no legal authority to do and that violated Mr. Stoyanov's First Amendment and Fourth Amendment rights. He experienced a sergeant who then used pepper spray to carry out that unlawful action, which is itself a constitutional violation. He then saw officers all around him when at least one threw him to the ground and kicked or kneed him in the ribs. He saw that no other officer stopped Officer Bigoni from doing that. He saw that Portland police and the city did nothing to discipline these officers for their violations of its rights. He saw that Portland Police Bureau and the city refused to acknowledge any wrongdoing other than the tacit, silent acknowledgement that they might be found liable for violation of rights. When Mr. Stoyanov started going to the protests, he was not someone who joined the crowd in chanting "all cops are bastards," because he didn't believe that. But what he experienced through months of protests and helping people to register to vote made him unsurprised when PPB attacked him like they did that night in Kenton Park. And what he's seen and experienced made him understand where that ACAB sentiment comes from. And that's something that I personally have heard from many people who participated in the protests last year. It's not just the bad acting officers who destroy the public trust in the police. It's also the officers who do nothing when their fellow officers illegally harm people. It's the sergeants who approve of the bad acts after the fact, or even order their officers to do the act. It's the police command who also approve of the acts and do nothing to retrain, educate, or discipline the bad actors. And it's the city who continues to allow their public safety employees to keep doing all of that over and over again. So what we've seen is that it's not just a few bad apples, it's a police and city culture that allows bad apples to thrive and make other apples rotten. It makes people understandably believe that the whole barrel of apples is rotten, and the city needs to act to stop that. Accountability is needed for all of those who engage in excessive force and for those supervisors who fail to discipline those officers. The people in the streets, the people filing lawsuits against the unconstitutional attacks by police, and the overwhelming number of voters who voted for a new police accountability system all want to see police violence stopped, and they want officers who violate people's constitutional rights to be held accountable. These lawsuits are, as Dan Handelman pointed out, at their base, paid from public funds. The officers involved and responsible are not affected at all. Their jobs don't change. They aren't disciplined. They don't have mandatory training to teach them. They don't even have mandatory training to teach them what they did was unacceptable and unlawful. And that's because according to PPB, the officers don't do anything wrong. They don't. Everything is justified. Everything is lawful. There are systems that exist to hold officers accountable, but the will to do that does not exist. That needs to change. What will it take to force the city to end this constant cycle of police violating people's civil rights and illegally hurting and killing people with impunity? I don't know. I would have assumed that we would have reached that point by now. So thankfully, I think you'll be happy. I'm concluding and asking Mr. Stoyanov and I urge the City Council to approve this settlement. But we also urge you, the City Council, to do more to prevent these acts of police violence from continuing to happen again and again and again. Thank you.
Thank you. Keelan, do we have others signed up to testify on this matter?
No, Mayor.
Very good. Colleagues, any questions before I call the roll? Please call the roll.
Maps.
Mr. Mayor, colleagues, I support this settlement, and here's why. With this ordinance, the City of Portland accepts responsibility for an incident which should never have happened I also support this ordinance because I believe this council has taken steps to make sure incidents like this will not happen again. In this past year, this council has taken important steps to improve police training, accountability, and capacity. And there are more reforms on the horizon. For example, I look forward to the implementation of body cams for police officers, the establishment of a new civilian oversight board, and possibly the adoption of a new discipline guide. For these reasons and more, I vote aye on this settlement.
Ryan.
Thank you, everyone, for showing up today and for the presentation. It was very helpful. Accountability is what this is all about. I think we landed at the right spot, and I look forward to continuing to see how the reform policies actually land in culture change. And I know we are we're making great decisions towards that effort. I vote aye.
Hardesty.
First, I want to say my apologies to Mr. Dmitry Stoyanov. What happened to you should never have happened to any community member. And I apologize on behalf of the city of Portland that you had that experience. Sitting here today, reliving those videos, leads me to say this. 2020 exposed a lot for us about the systems that we as a council and as a community needed to change. 7 bills were passed in the legislature last legislative session that helps us to create a new standard in community safety. I personally, with the support of the entire city council, led the effort to have the first of its kind, truly community independent police oversight board. Dan Handelman is one of those commissioners that will come back in 18 months and present to the council a policy recommendation to fully implement this oversight board. You may know that in the fall bump, we approved the hiring of a civilian training dean. In all my 30 plus years of working on police accountability, what I know is that we have to train police with community, not at the expense of community. I'm looking forward to working with the new training dean to make sure that we are putting trainings in place that are inclusive of communities' lived experience. We also had our own bill passed in Salem to ensure that when this Police Accountability Commission takes its seat, that they will have the authority to do what we promised the voters they would do. We are in a rebuilding phase in Portland Police Bureau. And I am excited about the opportunity for us to start recruiting high school folks from our community into all our first responder bureaus. So that as we are preparing for this new generation of first responders and community safety officers, they're grounded in our community, and the community will hold them accountable for the outcomes they want. I want to also just speak to the public who doesn't show up all the time at council meetings. It would be irresponsible for the city council to talk about a case that is in court prior to a settlement being presented to us. And so I do not want any member of the public to ever think that we're not all thinking about, feeling, empathetic to the pain that has been caused by public servants. I have a responsibility to put my city council face on and not actually do the outrage jump up and down. We have an obligation to 600,000 Portlanders to make sure that anybody who calls for help in our first responder system gets the right first responder when they need it. Thank you all for showing up today. Thank you for your testimony. And for the record, I plan to pull this item. I don't think we should have a $100,000 settlement on a consent agenda. I think it is in the public's interest. And I'm going to work with my colleagues to find out where we all think that line is. And hopefully we all can come with a just a council decision about what is the appropriate amount that is appropriate for us to have a full public dialogue and conversation about. I will stop where I started and say to Mr. Stroinoff, I apologize to you for what happened to you, and I thank you for your service. I vote aye.
Wheeler and Mayor, if I might interrupt just a moment, we have someone else who wished to testify.
Gosh, I mean, we're calling the roll.
Mayor, she's been here the whole time, and I was wondering who Karen Vaughn was.
Yeah. Okay. So why don't we do this? 3 minutes, name for the record, please. We'll suspend the vote.
I'm Karen Vaughn. I'm actually a senior claims analyst with risk management.
The person on the line who wished to testify is named Joy Wilson.
Hi, my name is Joy Wilson. I use she, her pronouns. I want to start by stating that I'm in full support of the settlement for Mr. Stoynoff for the undue suffering he endured at the hands of Officer Justin Damerville. I want to be clear that I am only in opposition to the process or lack thereof that leads to the repeated need for these settlements. I'm a busy, full-time working mother of 2 teens. I've been working HR for over 15 years. I chose this line of work because I love serving the greatest resource and asset to our community, and that's people. And when employees make mistakes, there's an intervention, coaching, training, and support to course correct. However, if repeated efforts for improvement are unsuccessful or the employee shows no effort to grow, the employee will be let go. It's pretty simple. If the initial behavior is bad enough, sometimes there's no second chance. It's a general understanding that bad actors get fired. It's horrendous enough that some members of the police force are misusing their power and victimizing the very citizens they're sworn to protect. The violence and abuse they inflict is unacceptable. That's full stop. But unfortunately, it's the numbers and the money that motivates most people to pay attention. So here we go. We paid out over $300K, I think that's a low estimate, this year alone for bad acting police. And we, the taxpayers, are paying the consequences of these abusive cops. My tax dollars, as a single mother, have to pay for this. And this is an unnecessary rinse and repeat cycle of police brutality, settlement, police brutality, settlement, rinse and repeat. How do I know these are not one-off rogue issues? Because on September 8th, 2020, I was abiding by all laws, standing peacefully on the sidewalk, declaring that Black Lives Matter. Officer Justin Damerville, the same officer that created this $100,000 settlement on the agenda today, arrested me for no reason other than he didn't like my assertion that Black Lives Matter. If I hadn't lived it myself or seen ample video footage from all angles of the intersection, I might not have believed how blatant Officer Damerville's abuse of power really was. As was mentioned earlier by the attorney, I too was never someone that would fall into the ACAB chant. That wasn't my perspective, but I tell you, it's really hard not to maintain a fair perspective after what I experienced. So that was September 8th, 2020. The victim we're discussing today was also abused by Damerville 20 days later on the 28th. Rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. Our community deserves better. Throwing money at settlements or hiring more officers is not a solution. My question for you, commissioners and mayor, is this: what are you doing to stop the settlement cycle? What are you doing to more immediately address the bad acting police and those that support them and the system that supports them?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. That completes testimony.
All right, and where are we in the roll?
We're to you.
All right, very good. I want to thank Mr. Bruggemeyer for being here today and giving us a thorough presentation. I want to thank Mr. Stoinhoff and Mr. Bruggemeyer for working with the city legal counsel on this agreement. I think this is eminently reasonable and fair, and I appreciate the efforts that all of you put into this settlement that you brought forth today. I support this settlement. I vote aye. The ordinance is adopted. And colleagues, I believe that completes our business this morning, Keelan.
It does, Mayor.
We are adjourned. Thank you all. Very happy holidays to everybody on the line.
Mayor, happy holidays. Bye. Volunteer at shelters.